That thing? It's been there as long as I've worked here. I think the government put it up.
The government, our government, put up thousands of paintings once. Looking back, it sometimes seems that every available square foot of government property got covered by a mural between 1933 and 1943. Those were the years that post offices, hospitals, schools, jails, libraries, and courthouses all turned into public galleries for monumental art. Art created by unemployed artists, paid for by taxpayers, and since then forgotten by just about everybody. In the midst of a depression, it was going to be an American Renaissance, and it almost was. Back in the early 30s, hard times held America tight. Many people were out of work. They needed jobs. President Franklin Roosevelt said, "Our primary task is to put people to work." And he did.
Of course, there was a deep depression. People couldn't find jobs. You couldn't get a job anywhere. It was after the war, you know. And so President Roosevelt came along, and he decided the best thing to do was to organize what they called the WPA, Works Progress Administration.
The WPA and other federal agencies like the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Public Works Administration and the Civil Works Administration gave Americans work helping their country, building courthouses, digging ditches, laying sidewalks, renovating old railroad stations. Armies of men and women spread across the country, building and cultivating and even decorating. Yes, there were jobs for artists, too, and they seldom worked steadily, even when times were good.
That put the artists to work, too. And I went along with them and did painting on that project. I think I did 22, possibly 25 paintings. And I think it was the best thing that ever happened here in America as far as art is concerned. Because the young, struggling artist, they gave him a chance to show his work to the public.
New Deal leaders had watched the government-sponsored mural movement in Mexico that made a hero of Diego Rivera, and they thought, why not pay our artists workmen's wages to decorate the buildings that the WPA puts up? Some people said it was frivolous, giving money to lazy bohemians, but Harry Hopkins said, hell, artists have to eat like anybody else. And the idea fit in so well with the New Deal's philosophy of each person contributing his share. Here was a chance to show that in America, painting and sculpting is good, honest work like any other profession. Our artists could become a national resource. The government would, it said, bring art to Main Street.
I want to tell you about the trip down there to Wood River. I had to go down there, you know, to see the building and match the mural with the color scheme of the building on the interior. So when I was going down there after I got off the train, I was walking down the street and everybody was running to the window, you know, to look at me. And I was wondering why they were looking at me so hard, you know. And I finally got to the post office, and after a little chat with the postmaster, I asked him why those people were looking at me so hard. And he told me, oh, that's very simple. He said, there are no colored people living here in this town. So I said, okay, and he said, well, he said, don't pay any attention to that. He said, I'm going to have you to my home for dinner tonight. I came to do the mural through a competition that was statewide throughout the state of Illinois. The government had built numerous post offices, you know, out through the southern portion of Illinois. I made numerous sketches, and they weren't all of stagecoaches. There were various things.
Commissioning decoration for public places was not a new idea. The Treasury Department had been doing it since the time of Alexander Hamilton. Then in 1933, it turned into a national art movement. The government would buy art for its buildings in Illinois as well as in Washington, using local talent instead of European-trained society painters. Those young artists who were making so much noise would get a chance to show their stuff, and out in the open, where all Americans could enjoy and learn from it.
They closed this floor off sometime in the 50s. The fire department said it wasn't safe to have children up past the 3rd floor in case of an emergency. Right in through here. You know, the kids say there's ghosts up here.
I knew a number of people that were on the project, and I happened to live in a studio building that Rainey Bennett lived in. And he was hired by the project to oversee a group, maybe 25 or 30 people. And after a while, he had so much work, he couldn't handle it all himself, and he talked me into coming over as his assistant. I resisted it at first because of the bad things that were being said about WPA. The Federal Arts Project was under the auspices of the WPA, and the reputation wasn't too good. And finally I went over to visit him at the University of Illinois Medical School to see what these people were doing. And it was very, very fascinating and entrancing to me. So I was hired by the Federal Art Project to help Rainey at the University of Illinois Medical.
For artists on relief and those with plenty of money, the center of the art world in the 1930s was the government projects. The Treasury section of Fine Arts held competitions and offered commissions for post office murals. The Federal Art Project of the WPA hired a corps of artists full-time in each state. People were known to give up well-paying jobs in order to join. Some Americans disliked the whole idea of the New Deal jobs program, and they seemed to hate the art projects most of all. One Chicago newspaper called the work of the Federal Art Project disgusting, depraved, and un-American. It said that the project artists were parasites, doing nothing to earn their $94 a month, except cause trouble.
I was with the group at the university for, I think it was about 6 months, and then they pulled me in and put me in charge of a poster project. We did designing of posters and reproduction for any tax-supported institution, one of which was Lincoln Park Zoo and Brookfield Zoo. We did a number of posters for Brookfield Zoo. They were on the elevated platforms. And then the other projects did sculpture, wood carving, and I guess that was the major project.
Any tax-supported institution could have a mural painted just by paying for the paint and canvas. The artist was provided free of charge. Project artists spent almost a year at the University of Illinois Medical Center doing whatever jobs of decorating came up.
The Anatomical Museum has, by its name, you can tell, specimens of the human anatomy. And under light, they deteriorate very badly. So I think it was Rainey that came up with the idea of, instead of just whitewashing the windows, to depict a history of medicine and surgery and pharmacology. They were panes of glass, approximately 10 by 15, and we rigged up a sandblasting machine to treat each one of these pieces of glass so that it would provide a tooth for the paint to stick to. And I'm very surprised to learn that they're still in existence. And then I made most of the original sketches after doing research on the medicine end of it. And then the people would paint these things with oil paint under our supervision.
The Illinois Arts Project, which employed Ralph Graham and Archibald Motley and 300 more artists, set forth its aims this way: to employ needy artists to produce mural paintings and other works of art for public buildings, to take talented artists off the relief rolls, to conserve and utilize one of the greatest natural resources of the state, to advance art as a definite asset of the state, to establish a closer relationship between artists and the public, to foster in the people intolerance of ugliness, hatred of drabness, a genuine desire for beauty in everyday places.
You know, I think there is a mural there. I just don't know why we covered it up. Must have been some reason. Oh, here comes the custodian. We'll find out in just a moment. I just don't know why it's covered up. Why?
What is he doing?
Oh, well, we're going to see what's underneath. Look.
I got it. All right.
Oh, now I remember why we covered it up.
The New Deal's American Renaissance bloomed throughout the 30s. The art project was so successful that the WPA created a federal theater project, the Federal Writers Project, and the Federal Music Project. The Farm Security Administration hired photographers and filmmakers to record the desolation and optimism of the Depression.
The WPA is a project I can never forget. Even though we had a lot of bad luck in those days and poverty, there were still some real good things about the WPA that I'll never forget. One thing, for example, I got to first go into the first part of it. A lot of men were laid off, and including my father. He was a part of the WPA, and I had an uncle who was in the WPA orchestra. You see, they had an orchestra back in those days, and some of the best musicians were in that orchestra. There was no other work because everybody was unemployed. And there were a lot of other good things in those days that were very helpful to people. For example, that's all around here in the back, you'll find a lot of murals painted by different workers who were a part of the WPA project. But the thing that stands out mostly in my memory, there was a song. I remember as a kid, I used to walk around on 35th Street, and in every tavern, there was a certain song called WPA. I remember one thing about this song. We used to sing this song, but they finally took it off because they said it was making fun of the government's work project. But I vaguely remember this song as going somewhat like this. Now, let me see if I can still remember it. Work while you work, play while you play, lean on your shovel 6 hours a day. Don't mind the boss, he'll get the blue slip in a day. WPA. Work while you work, play while you play, lean on your shovel 6 hours a day. Don't mind the boss, you'll get the pink slip in a day. WPA. I'm so tired, I don't know what to do. Uninspired, cause I lean on my shovel till my day is through. Work while you work, play while you play, lean on your shovel 6 hours a day. Don't mind the boss, he'll get the pink slip in a day. WPA, 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 WPA.
Spirit of those times is hard even to imagine these days. Nearly all the artists were progressives, pleased to be among the workers. In Chicago, militants organized the Artists' Union, and some threatened periodically to go off and fight in the Spanish Civil War. Often they picketed project headquarters, but every afternoon they came inside to work alongside those who painted flowers and fairy tales. All American artists had, they said, the same goal, to beautify and teach. It was an ennobling mission.
Do you think it's true that people who were on the Federal Art Project were lazy and were just wasting money?
Not a bit. I've never ran across anybody that was, as they called them, boondogglers. In fact, it was a little the other way. They wanted to give more than was required of them. It really humanized me. I was pretty much of a snob and thought I could do it all by myself. And I got involved with these people, and it promptly brought me down to the proper level. And there was a warmth in all these projects that I ran into, and a great camaraderie, and everybody would help everybody else. There were no prima donna performances at all.
Someone wrote in 1936, "For the first time in our history, the man in the street began to realize that the artist was a creature of his own flesh and blood, with the right to eat, that he was not necessarily a freak or a parasite." And in 1937, another observer wrote, "Something has happened. American artists have come out of the alleys of Bohemia and are now trudging the highways of the American continent. They are shaking hands with farmers, technicians, politicians, teachers. They have seen a slant of quick American light leading toward new vistas. They are painting American stuff on the walls of American buildings." What did they paint? History. Big events from the history of the community or the nation or mankind. Little events from the past, too. Also legends and fairy tale scenes. Slices of contemporary life, often idealized. They painted good examples for children. Sometimes they painted visions of things entirely their own. The only rules were no nudes, no dives, no political caricature. So project artists painted, by and large, what they felt. Starting about 1939, there was suddenly less and less time to do murals. Project artists worked instead on maps and charts for the armed forces. Preparedness was in the air. And the orders that came in were for recruitment booths and floats for defense parades. Money for the projects was slowly cut off. And in 1943, the Depression officially over, the art projects were dissolved altogether. Much of their work was abandoned or destroyed. Many people hoped they would start up again after the war, but they never did.
I think the WPA was very important for the artists, more so than any other field at the time, because the country was hungry, they were starving, people couldn't get jobs, and they put the poor artist to work at last, gave him something to look forward to, and gave him some earnings to take care of himself and his family.
During that desperate decade of crazy experiments on a national scale, an old dream had been brought to life with tax money and art patron bureaucrats and an army of tireless young artists who decorated the American landscape for $94 a month. The Federal Art Project was a silver lining to the black cloud of depression. Even today, people who take the time to look around can enjoy its glow. Toward the end, an official publication of the Illinois WPA said this: The Federal Art Project has brought help to hundreds of artists and craftsmen in Illinois. It has given them the means and the opportunity to produce the beauty that is their contribution to their fellow man. Skills have been conserved, new talents discovered. A closer understanding between the artist and the people has been fostered. It has brought to countless of the people of Illinois works of art of high quality in public places where they and their children may continue to enjoy them.
Work while you work, play while you play. Lean on your shovel 6 hours a day. Don't mind the boss, he'll get the blue slip in a day. WPA. Work while you work, play while you play. Lean on your shovel 6 hours a day. Don't mind the boss, he'll get the pink slip in a day. WPA.